Today we're joined by KK Downing, founding guitarist of heavy metal legends Judas Priest. I have been looking forward to having the opportunity to do this interview. KK, thanks for joining us today. Before we turned on the recorder, we were just having a quick chat. It's about midday over there on Thursday. Is it Friday over there as well at the moment?
Yes, it's Friday, about midday, and thanks a lot for the call, and it's great to reach out and be able to communicate again with our audience down under.
Yes, perfect. It's been a while. So you're doing a lot of media right now around your autobiography, Heavy Duty, Days and Nights. You left Judas Priest in 2011. So why did you feel now was the time to release a book about your time with the band?
Well, I guess 2011, the years went by and we're pretty close to 2019 now, aren't we? So I guess obviously there was no intention or inclination at the beginning as the years went by. I thought, do you know what, time's not exactly on anybody's side really in these days. So I just thought that it would be kind of now or never, really, because you never know. Something could happen next year and I might not have the time to do something, or anything could happen, So, and these things do take quite a long time. I wasn't sure, but probably took the best part of a year, really, from beginning to end. So quite a lot of things have to go into it. So, I just thought that, as we say, never put off till tomorrow what you can do today, they say.
Yeah, okay. I'll jump. There's a few other things I'm going to ask you, but we're already sort of into there. So, this book was co-written with author Mark Eglinton. Yeah. So when you decide that you want to, put together an autobiography, how does the writing process work between, your memories as a musician and his ability to, spin that into something compelling on paper?
Yeah, well, we had an initial meet. I guess another reason for choosing Mark, he's actually in the UK, even though he's a long way from, well, not by Australian terms, but he's up there in Scotland, so it's about a 5-hour drive, something like that. But we had an initial beer and a meet and a chat and stuff like that at some length, and a couple of more meetings to get to kickstart everything. And then we did a lot of stuff by phone, with Skype and that, where kind of Mark decided really the best place to start is at the beginning. So we kind of worked through everything pretty much chronologically, because that's how life goes, isn't it? And but it was pretty cool because I kind of liked the idea of between myself and the band and obviously all the fans. It's been a long journey. We've been on together, quite a few decades. So I just kind of fancied the ideas of introducing myself a little bit more to the fans that know me as KK up there on the stage, through the albums and everything. Get to know the person a little bit, and how it kind of how my involvement came to fruition really in the 60s, and obviously I told a story in the book. Obviously, getting off to a pretty bad start in life, how I actually managed to get onto the world's biggest stages, and I just thought I wanted to tell that story really.
And so where did that come from? Because there was a previous incarnation before Judas Priest was Judas Priest. So how did it become Judas Priest, and where does that actual band name come from?
Yeah, well, so I quickly, in a nutshell, I went to, I think it was a school concert, and there's a blues group playing there, and all the girls and guys were trying to dance to this group, which was I told a lot about. And they were called, I think they were called the Jug Band. That was kind of a popular blues name in the old days, and they had a singer called Al Atkins, and I thought the band were pretty cool. Kind of But the guitar player, who was a young lad, he was just 18, had a tragic. Well, in actual fact, I think he actually drove the group's van into a telephone kiosk, and he died. So it was all very tragic. But the band disbanded, and the bass player and the singer, Brian and Al, they got together and they decided they were going to form a new band. Now this would be, I don't know, 68, something like that. 60, I don't know. It was such a long time ago. So they were going to form a new band, and they were looking for a guitar player. And I don't know how I got to find out about it. I've got no idea. But anyway, I went round to their house and auditioned and didn't get the job because they were looking for pretty much a blues player, which I would already, in my own mind, I'd gone past that, because I was listening to Hendrix and the Cream and, more progressive blues artists, and so I was kind of into more, diverse, long improvisations, solos and stuff like that. So that didn't happen, but they went on to form a band called Judas Priest, and they hired another guitar player, and I think they were together for not quite a year, I don't think, and then they disbanded, and the story goes, I think, around about the time of excellent album. Well, I think it was Bob Dylan's first album, or very close to it, one of the albums. There was a song on there called Frankie Lane and Judas Priest. So I think that's where the guys had the name from, which was super, super cool, because I'd heard the name Judas Priest. I actually saw it spray painted on the side of an old van,
Right.
driving through the housing estate, and I'm thinking, I tell the story in the book, I'd give anything to be in that van. There's this long-haired dude, I had long hair as well, driving the van, and I thought, I want to be in that band, I want to be in that van. So later, the two guys came and they were watching just myself, Ian, and a drummer doing all of our improvisations, and Al said, "Can I join the band?" And we said, "Yeah, great." But we've got to keep the name Judas Priest because it's so cool, but that was all before electricity, I think, Jess.
It's we'll talk about that a little bit more because I got into the band into the mid to later 90s, and we'll talk about that in a second. But with the publicity that you're doing at the moment and all the interviews, the question has come up again of why you had left the band. And as we mentioned before we turned on the recorder, you're gradually providing further and further insights to this without, I guess, starting a war of words. And from what I'm starting to gather is there ultimately was a bit of a split between yourself and the other guitarist, Glenn Tipton, to sort of where it reached a point where you felt that you had just had enough and decided to walk away. Is that fair to sort of say, I guess, what was the crux of the argument at the point in time?
Yeah, there was no particular argument as such. Like I say, the parts to the book is pretty cool. I started at the beginning telling the story of me as a young lad, but basically with no hope of doing anything, I think, really. But I cut free and became a free spirit at the age of 15, and I found music, and like I say, I wanted to tell that story, the transition into, and also how metal was made, and I get into kind of a lot of stuff that the fans, I'm sure, would like to know about, really. A little bit inside look at Judas Priest and how it all happened and worked, and the fun bits and the not so fun bits and everything. And as you say, later on, I kind of, because it's not one kind of quick fix, this is what happened. We had an argument one day, and so I jumped ship. It was kind of over a long, long, lengthy period of time, because, relationships, can get strained, can't they? Whether it's husband and wife, boyfriend, girlfriend, so, at work, at school, it's tough to be in total harmony. I think it's etched in stone, isn't it? I mean, Doc and have just got back together after 20
That's right.
years.
Yeah.
Axl Rose leaves every week or something and comes back. Rob left the band for 14 years and came back, and it is somebody has a wobble, and and Machine Heads, they've just gone, oh, that's it,
Yeah, a couple of them are leaving now as well. Phil Demmel's leaving, that's right, yes.
So, but that'll get fixed again, but like I say, and all the fans are going, no, you can't do this, the band is perfect as it is, you guys have just got to hug and kiss, and I think that's what happened to me, I was a big Hendrix fan, and when Hendrix said, that's it, Noel Redding, Mitch Mitchell, you're out, I'm moving on, I'm going, oh, no, you can't. I've bought into this. This is really, you guys are my heroes, not just one person, but it's the band, because I am a music fan. It's the band name and what the band stands for, and that is just something that's like undeniable and has to go on, and so it was a long series of things that happen, that go forward, and you have to just go with it, and if I can put it in a nutshell, I mean, a band is a collection of several guys, and you quickly learn that no two people on the planet are the same.
Yes.
Everybody's so eclectic, and so you have guys with a bit stronger-minded, stronger characters. Other guys more placid, more tolerant. You get but in the early days, there's no spoils to split up. You're all there in the trenches. You're all equal. There is no money. There is no fame. No success. You've got nothing to do. You've got nothing to want to grab an extra piece of. But eventually, you climb the ladder. You start to get bigger. More successful. And I think it's fair to say, it wasn't a bad situation in Judas Priest. I mean, we stood the test of time much longer than a lot of other bands, so it wasn't that bad, but it wasn't without, the inevitable pecking order arises, and you've got the, certain, egos, whether they're obvious or not, things happen, and you start to have an awareness of that, and you go with it. Some people go with it. I mean, but after a long period of time, it's not so bad. Like I say, when you're riding the crest of a wave and it's all good and you're flying around, you kept so busy. But after kind of 40 years, and things seem to be kind of slowing down and not quite what they were, it becomes a lot harder. Certain things become a lot harder to tolerate, and and they start to magnify themselves a little bit, and I think I do square it up in the book that probably nobody's fault in particular, because everybody, as Frankie says, everybody does it kind of their way.
Yeah.
So it's not for me to say, hey, you can't do this on stage, or you can't do this before you go on, because it's rock and roll, but if it didn't suit me at a certain time, as I said before, lots of band members make decisions, whether they're snap decisions, regrettable decisions, or whatever it is. Certain points, it's like the straw that breaks the camel's back at the time, and that's kind of what happens, really, Jeff.
So do you maintain any relationship with any of the guys these days, then?
No, I had, but just recently, the last year or two, it seems to have gone even a bit more kind of strained and a bit quirky. Obviously, lots of things get out on the internet, which get augmented, really.
Yeah.
I do an interview, like if I do an interview with you today, speaking to all the fans in Australia. It's quite easy to pick up one thing that I said, change a few words, put it on Blabbermouth, and all the fans think, oh, KK's phoned up Blabbermouth and he said this.
He's going off, yeah, of course.
And it's just something I could say in a light-hearted, conversation that just kind of gets a bit twisted and that, and then that causes a reaction from someone else. So it's kind of, kind of all happens like that. It's almost like I don't know, verging on I don't know. Can I use the word like propaganda in the Second World War or something?
Yes.
You know, it just you have to combat these things, and it's kind of all a bit strange. But
all right. Well, I want to ask you. After you leave a band like Judas Priest, we hear about things like the cult of celebrity, and how there's oftentimes a lot of hangers-on, with people who are successful, particularly within the entertainment industry. Obviously, your life would have changed after you left the band. Did you have a difficult time, I guess, coming back to normalcy, I suppose I'll call it?
Yeah, yes and no, really, because I think that for someone like me that had been who I was for so long in the band that I was with, it was there was always a lot of things happening, and still is, because quite quickly, for example, the world becomes aware, KK's not in Priest any longer. Maybe we can form a band with him or get him to play on our album and stuff like that, So lots of so-called propositions or requests or favours, So I did the odd thing, here and there, kept pretty busy, just as favours, really, never a money thing. I mean, my good buddy Les Binks, great drummer, obviously was with us in the 70s, just called up recently and said he would like to re-record Beyond the Realms of Death, which he was instrumental in writing that song. And so I said, yeah, Les, send me the files over. And so we did that, and so I've kind of always kept my hand in, and but obviously I run my website, which is like a big fanzine as well, out of Helsinki. That's run by fans, kkdowning.net. A bit of a plug there if nobody knows about that, but check it out, because it's not all about me. It's just like a big fanzine run by fans, and that's the way I wanted to do it. So, and that keeps me pretty busy as well, really. Questions and answers. I did that for many years with all of the fans, staying in touch. So, even though I've not been in the band for like 7 to getting on for 8 years, it actually is like I've never left. To be fair, I've always been a part of it. But as I say, my departure is one of those things. Probably, nobody's fault. A bit like the Titanic. I mean, nobody's fault, but everybody played a part in it, and the ship went down, but as I do maintain, and I always will, whatever happened in the past, or whatever is happening now, or whatever will happen in the future, I do state that I have total respect for all of my bandmates, because we shared an awful lot together. It was a long journey. We fought a lot of battles. We had immense success, and we did literally live a life together, because we would spend more time with each other than we ever did with our families, girlfriends, wives and kids or whatever. To be fair, many times it was like that, so you can imagine how it kind of got. But, I would like to think that, it has to be reciprocated, really. I mean, I say that because, it was kind of, it was a lifetime that we spent together, and it was successful, and we can't complain, and we certainly couldn't have done it without each other, is what I think. I certainly couldn't have done it without the rest of the guys in the band.
Okay. You had mentioned Les Binks before, and it's a good segue, because I wanted to ask, Judas Priest has a bit of a Spinal Tap relationship with its drummers. Why was it so hard to fill that role permanently? I think there was about 10 guys that were on the kit in the band. Yeah,
don't know why that is. I really don't know. So some of the guys, I don't know why they departed. Some of the guys, I do. I mean, Dave Holland, bless him, he just came off stage one night and said that, he wasn't happy with the performance and he was leaving. And that was it, really. Don't really mean, that's kind of what happened, and he left. We had one drummer who was very good, our very first drummer, very good friend of mine, John Ellis, which he probably is unknown, but he left because his girlfriend told him he had to. I think that was, so these things do happen, guys, lots of reasons why guys leave bands. Al Atkins and our drummer Chris Congo, who I mentioned in the book, great guys, but they had to leave because they couldn't sustain life without some money coming in. So that was another drummer gone. So that's kind of the way that it's been, really.
And the other thing, we're both talking blabbermouth, and I remember a few years ago there was a story that came out about Dave Holland, and as you had mentioned him, and he was, for people that don't know, he was the drummer who was around during this 80s period where you guys were absolutely enormous, and he ended up being found guilty of sexual assault apparently on a boy, and the only thing I could find about it on Wikipedia was that he was adamant about his innocence, but that he also then came out as bisexual. Was any of this behavior evident during the years that he was in the band with you guys?
No, absolutely not at all. Absolutely not. I can state that categorically. So it was a massive, when obviously we heard the news, it was a massive surprise. But having said that, I mean, we've been in courtrooms as a band being accused of horrendous things, and it was all rubbish.
Yeah. Oh, I'd love to talk about that. I've got a few notes on that.
I mean, but lots of, I have an awareness that lots of things happen in courtrooms. I've been in courtrooms and I've been astonished at people that actually tell lies in the courtroom that shouldn't tell lies. Legal people, and it's absolutely, when I was growing up, I always agreed with my gran. Oh yeah, they should bring back hanging, bring back corporal punishment.
Yeah. Because
when I was kind of growing up, I think the world's gone too soft. It's like, you read in the paper some guy's raped this girl or something, and he gets like
probation.
3 months suspended probation or something. It's crazy what happens. But as I've traversed through my life and gone through ordeals and circumstances I've been through, I've totally changed my tune, because now I know why hanging was abolished, because corporal punishment. Because lots of innocent people have certainly gone free, and lots of guilty people have certainly gone free, and vice versa, So we have to err on the side of caution. But my own take on it is Dave was a really great guy, fantastic chap, and great drummer, very integral part of Judas Priest. And, so much so that what he meant to me, as an individual and as a friend, I prefer to take his word on what the situation was, because we had been indicted for, stuff that we hadn't done, because when you're a certain profile of a person and people think there's plenty of money around, it's amazing what comes out of the woodwork and has a go at you,
So, again, when this trial happened, I think it was 1990, if I'm not mistaken, and for people that listen that don't know this was sort of it was a massive milestone at that point in time, because effectively it was a case against your right to free speech and being an artist in music, and there were 2 young men who committed suicide while listening to Stained Class, which is one of your albums, and then you guys were effectively put on trial for subliminal, do you want to call them satanic messages within the albums, and they were trying to sue you, not criminally, but to gain money out of you. Is that effectively what was happening? How did this sort of play out during that time?
Well, yeah, let's backtrack just a little bit there. These guys were, as stated, listening to stay in class, is what they said. And how do we know that? Well, we were told that when whoever it was went into the one teenager's bedroom, that staying class was on the turntable. So this is what we were told. But do we really know that? It seems a little bit kind of incredible that, there's the record, we'll listen to that and we'll find a subliminal message. I mean, that's a long shot. That's winning the lottery, isn't it, for some lawyer that wants to make some cash?
Yes.
So no, that's a tall order, I'm afraid. That's what I think.
So how long did this trial get brought out, though? Because it was a significant story at the time.
Yeah, but lots of things were leading up to it, I think, yes, really, because obviously certain people were already having a go at what we were doing, in rock and metal. I mean, Ozzy, I think he almost, he was almost dragged through the courts a couple of times, for Suicide Solution because of the lyrics and stuff. There was the PRMC having a go at, our genre and
it was
music.
Dee Snider a few years before, yeah.
Yeah, all of that was going on. So I think somebody had to, at some point it was bound to happen, and it was probably going to be either Ozzy or Judas Priest. I think, let's face it, the most likely candidates. So again, it's a big question mark there, okay, it's Judas Priest this time, but obviously, when we look back through the evidence and all of the testimony in that court case, the two lads, and another reason for me telling the story in the book, really, because that could have happened to me if I didn't get out, at a certain age, and I escaped that life, the family, disconnected family. I mean, the parents had racked up, I think, 5 divorces between them. The one lad used to the dad used to lock him in the garage and beat him with a leather strap, and all of these things going on in these teenagers' lives. But they had surpassed the age of 15. They were still there through the most influential lives, and things were probably building up, The one guy just got fired and got into an argument with his boss. There was lots of things going on in their lives, and it was a spontaneous thing that they did, it's a tragic story, but I guess someone had to, do what we did, which was go there, defend and stand our ground and rebut the whole thing, which was a bit ridiculous. And unfortunately, hopefully that, steadied the ship forevermore, and it seems like it did the trick because our music, and all the guys, all the people that create this great music that we love, have been left alone since that case. So thumbs up there.
So you talked about not only your own upbringing, but a lot of bands who developed this sound. As we've talked about, metal inherently came from the blues sound, but you also talk about these boys in the trial. Is there heavy metal as a genre? It's inherently working class and blue collar, and it hasn't seemed to have, risen up between those, hard lifestyle. Do you think that's why it's sort of, do you have a belief of why it's entrenched within that sort of social demographic?
Yeah, I think, certainly from my own part, kind of when I was younger, I kind of had the inkling that music, because I was struggling to listen and find things that I liked, my sisters were listening to Elvis and the Beatles and the Beach Boys and all of that, and I'm thinking, I wasn't particularly looking, but I'm thinking there's nothing for me really to listen to that, until I had an awareness of certain things. There were certain things that I heard when I was very young like in 1964, 65, the Kinks, I heard they had a hit song called "You Really Got Me," and I thought, I like that. I can listen to that. I like that. I mentioned in the book the protest song by Barry Maguire, "Eve of Destruction." I like that. Don't know why I like that, but I like that. And then when I first heard Hendrix and saw him in 1967, that to me was the first time, that I really think that I had this sort of awareness of what we know now as like heavy metal, really, because it wasn't blues, it wasn't progressive blues. I was hearing something, within some of the songs that was different to me, and so I set on my quest, really, when I started, to write material at the age of, 17, 18 or something. I was thinking of this, don't ask me why, but, dark, moody, something that's meaningful, good lyrics, some meaningful lyrics, meaningful, emotional kind of energy in the music. And I guess I was always thinking that there's kind of, because we had the wonderful blues music, coming over from the States in mass, and I loved that as well. But I didn't want to, walk that path. I thought there was more to be had. So I was always, pushing forward, and that's always the way that I was, essentially creating what I would have to say was a working class white kids blues, music, something different, but with as much help and meaning, for young white kids like me, really, to be fair. That's what I think, and that was the quest I was on, and that was always in my mind right until the very end, because when I would sit down and do something from my inner sanctum, my soul, musically, it had to have some passion and meaning and something that certain people could relate to. And obviously, coming from a working class background, that was all I knew. So I was giving everything I did, giving everything up to people like myself.
And so, what changed? Because British Steel became this really sort of genre-defining album that broke out for you guys. But there was 4 or 5 albums before this, and I've read you've publicly said on record like British Steel is the first heavy metal album. So how do you perceive the band before that time?
No, I think what I said or what I actually meant, or either I think British Steel was the album that eventually consolidated everything, within the band Judas Priest, and everything before that was slowly kind of evolving towards that pinnacle point in late 79, 1980, I think, and the reason I say that is because, we as Judas Priest, we did from the get-go, we were kind of, we were different, obviously we needed to be if we were going to be successful, you need to be, you can't be a copy of anything else. So, but we were evolving, going through the motions. We were, the music, a lot of it was kind of dark, moody. Obviously, it was meaningful, and so we traversed and we did what we did. We had a great name for the band. We had a great lineup, musicians, and we had, a lot of great material. But sometime in the 70s, around about 76, I think, it was just apparent that we didn't look quite right. We didn't look like who we were and what we wanted to be, really. But again, nobody's fault. It was just the fact that the story I tell is the fact when I was young and my sisters were listening to all of the bands I mentioned before, a lot of those bands had a uniform look, like the Beatles, the Mersey Beats, Jerry and the Pacemaker, all of that stuff. Same haircut, same clothes. So it's not surprising that all of the blues artists and the progressive blues bands and, and everybody that came, even later on, including Hendrix, The Cream, Led Zeppelin, whoever it was, everyone had their own kind of individual kind of clothes and the way that they looked as an individual artist. And so it was something you gave a wide berth to, really, or everybody walking on there with the same clothes. You probably wouldn't even think about, Judas Priest going on there with the same, all wearing a suit or something and a tie and all having the same. But then kind of the penny dropped a little bit, and I thought to myself, do you know what? We do need a uniform. I know bands don't do it, but Judas Priest need to do it. And I'm thinking, and it needs to be black.
Okay. Yeah.
Black is the colour for what we do. It has to be, But if we all wear black, well, people see us from off the stage, Okay, so what, and I'm thinking, okay, we'll add some metal, shiny stuff on there, studs and that, So basically, that's what I did, and there's some pictures in the book that illustrate that, with just me. But I mean, I looked the same as the other guys, really, prior to that decision, pretty much. We had silks and satins. They would be pink, green, cream, yellow, So it was something had to change, and it had to change now. And so I thought that I went that route and in hope that the rest of the guys would kind of literally follow suit. So I had a chat with Rob, and we went and got some clothes made, and for a while just myself and Rob had that look. And then very quickly, say by British Steel, everything came together with that album. Great album sleeve, really cool songs. We were happy with the album. Great name for the band. And we've got this look even, and I call it a uniform look because it was across the board leather and studs, with different designs, but it pulled, consolidated everything, and the rest is history, really. Full on metal was born right there and then.
Well, it's funny that you mentioned that. So maybe I've taken that out of context because it sounds like you're referring to heavy metal as its look and feel, I suppose you can say, because there's been I've tried to read a lot of information of when heavy metal actually became heavy metal, and nobody can seem to create a defining point. There's all this sort of mixture between Zeppelin to Black Sabbath. A lot of people say it was Sabbath's self-titled album, but even leading on to MC5, who brought in like this really heavy blues sound. But when you talk about British Steel in this particular light as you're doing, it's fascinating to me because I know I think Kerry King from Slayer is on record saying Judas Priest is his favorite band, and he continues to carry that look. I remember, Dimebag Darrell had the razor blade necklace that he always wore on stage with him. So, the particular influence of that album in time is, it's clearly carried around to a lot of the bands who I think are the pinnacle of heavy metal from my generation.
Yeah. Like I say, when it comes to heavy metal, I was there at the very beginning, and I've mentioned some of the embryos that, in my opinion, fed and sowed the seed within me. I could mention some other songs where maybe not complete songs, maybe, but to me, if it had a meaning to me, if it was just a riff or a song, or something. I mean, there was some very early Rolling Stone stuff, that was kind of appealing to me because it was raw edge. The guys didn't look clean cut like the Beatles and everything. It was more along the lines of a little bit of look and a little bit of sound. But essentially what appealed to me was songs that weren't 12 bars. They weren't chord sequences. There were songs that really were based around a riff. When I mentioned You Really Got Me, that doesn't fit into blues, doesn't fit into pop. It's not a chord sequence. It's the embryo of heavy metal, and that's what. And great that Van Halen came out and did it. When I say heavy metal, I mean it's all encompassing. The evolution, rock, heavy metal. A lot of that kind of goes together, you know.
When you talk about it, it's interesting to me because going back to those sorts of early records, that sort of sound or that a lot of the interviews you guys are defined by sort of that highway sound. And when I go back to those records from around the 70s, there's only a couple songs that I really define. One was Sabbath's "Children of the Grave." And, when you talk about British Steel, I distinctly remember Rapid Fires almost being like one of the first sort of thrash heavy metal songs that you could define as.
Yeah. And I think there's quite a lot of stuff before that, I mean, I can remember when I first heard the Sabbath album. Obviously, I became a fan later on, but I thought, great, somebody's doing something that is, along the lines of what I said. Obviously, we as Judas Priest were playing, we came out with our record, not too long after that, but we were out there on the road playing our songs and playing stuff like Victim of Changes. It had a name change, but the song was pretty much the same. So we were playing stuff like that and songs like Run of the Mill, and Never Satisfied and stuff like that. We were playing all of that stuff, which was different, I mean, I have to commend Sabbath. They came out with, there was a few bands doing something along those lines, at the time. So it was great, and it just kind of that actually kind of confirmed that what I was thinking in my mind, was right, really. That there is new stuff to be had. There is new. There are new directions that bands can go. I mean, I probably mentioned the band Quatermass, for example, in the book. They were a three-piece, without a guitar player. But a lot of stuff they did, to me, was dark, meaningful. It wasn't blues, it wasn't pop, it wasn't chord sequences. There was a lot of keyboard riffage in there, So it was that type of thing, but it was wonderful times. Everything, the whole music was just evolving in so many ways. I mean, it was great when I first heard, Deep Purple, for example. They were creating songs exactly. They weren't 12 bars. They weren't necessarily based around chord sequences, and they certainly weren't pop, jazz, or anything else. So straight away, how great was that? Deep Purple in rock was a tremendous album.
As originators of heavy metal, as a genre, it has continued to evolve probably more than any other form of music because heavy metal is meant to be heavy. So everyone's trying to get to being heavier. Through its evolution, are you a fan, or do you follow any of the subgenres across thrash or black or death or grind or anything that's come out of Judas Priest?
Well, yes, of course, obviously, because I'm aware of, there's a lot of great bands, isn't there, like, that have come out of what we call now classic metal, and I guess that's the category that Judas Priest fall into now, because, we took things a step further than, and then inevitably someone has to take over, and it's like anything else. Really, that's why televisions have got thinner and mobile phones have got smaller, and it's the way of the world. Things have to keep moving, and because you can't keep reinventing the wheel, we can't expect teenagers of today to be able to come up with something brand new where there were so many of us, kind of squeezing the sponge as hard as we could back in the 70s, the 80s, the 90s, and probably still today. So if people can put a different twist on it and create something new, because that's what we had to do as Judas Priest. We couldn't be, a mimic of another band, and that's why it's gone as it has. And inevitably, a lot of good stuff comes out. So as well, we've got the Metallicas, the Machine Heads, the Megadeth, and and like you say, the Slayers of the world, and that can only be positive.
Okay. I want to take you back. We talked about this very briefly. When I was in my teens, that we're talking about roughly about the mid-90s, the band gets back together, and you reform with Tim Owens, who I believe is playing in a cover band at that point in time. And when Halford comes back into the fold a few years later, oftentimes his role in the reformation of Priest is overlooked. But those are the, outside of like the greatest hits packages, that's the time that I got into Priest. What do you remember about his time with the band and how that changed the dynamic?
Yeah, well, we were kind of in a situation. Rob had decided to go it alone, and then after that, everything was in suspension really, because then, pretty much right away, Glenn had. I think just before, I think Glenn was going to do his solo stuff. I think he was planning to do it just before Rob left. But so Rob left, so Glenn thought it's an opportunity for him to do his couple of albums and stuff like that, playing with other musicians, and so we just kind of sat and waited to see what was going to happen. We knew it was going to be a tall order to find someone that could do what Rob did, and we knew it was going to be an even taller order to get people to accept that person, if and when we found him. So it was going to take time, I guess. Obviously we heard about Ripper, and we thought that, he's young and strong, and we flew him to England, and he was just incredible. Obviously he's an incredible vocalist. In fact, he just texted me last night. I don't know, he's somewhere in Europe. He's out there with the Three Tremors.
Okay.
The Three Tremors. So, yeah, he's out there playing Greece and Germany and all of those places. So, so he's having some fun out there doing that. But yeah, I mean, it was great. I think, and we were fine with that, because we knew that his capabilities were sensational, and he was a great guy, and a good fun addition, and fun and serious addition to the band. And we now refer to those years as the Ripper years, and with lots of fondness, and he did help us to get over that issue that we had at the time.
The couple albums that he did with the group, as you said, it's hard for a lot of people to accept someone coming into the band, especially when they're not, the known frontman. Because the albums weren't as commercially successful at the time, was there any, doubt in your mind or the band's mind of moving forward with him if that was going to be the case, had Rob not come back into the fold?
I think that that's a good question, actually. I guess it's only because the fact that there was an opportunity that I became aware of that Rob would come back, that led to him actually returning, so that if that opportunity hadn't have been there and Rob didn't show, that it was possible for him to return, then we would have inevitably have continued for sure, because we would have to. We were still, I think, a really excellent band with Ripper. I know it wasn't the original trademark lineup, obviously without Rob, so it was difficult, but who knows, standing the test of time, I think we would have gone on to do really quite well. Why not? Because the rest of the band was the same, and when we did have a fantastic vocalist. I mean, I don't know. I mean, I can count on one hand. I think the vocalists have incredible ranges, and obviously Rob being one, Ripper certainly, Ralph Shapers from Gamma Ray and etc. You know, those guys are extraordinary on the planet. I mean, there are some of the vocalists. You know, if I've left anyone out, I do apologise. But they're not in abundance, these guys, you know. They're certainly not. But at the end of the day, the way I see it as a fan, being as of the age that I am and being there from the beginning, is the fact that, from my experience, we become accustomed as fans to accepting that one band, one voice. You know, there are a couple of exceptions. But the Rolling Stones, Mick Jagger, Queen, Freddie Mercury, Iron Maiden, Bruce Dickinson, Judas Priest, Rob Halford, you know, and that's what we think of, and probably quite rightly, because that's what we buy into as fans. We've been to all the concerts, we've followed the band for all the years, we've bought the T-shirts, we've been fans, we bought the records, you know, and now, you know, to get us to accept someone else, you know, singing the songs that someone wrote the lyrics to and they've been performing for years, it's tough, you know. It's very, very difficult for fans to accept, and I understand that completely.
So, there in the 90s, I also remember the movie Rockstar with Mark Wahlberg, and I was told, or at least there was a rumor, that film was sort of based upon the experiences of Ripper. Is that just industry lore? Did that ever cross your desk?
No, that's absolutely true. It was, because initially we were going to be involved as a band, you know, in that movie, but we didn't feel exactly comfortable, you know, with it really, because these things, it's so difficult, isn't it? Difficult, apart from Spinal Tap, which we all accept, but
yes.
But to try to do something seriously, where, you know, actors try to be rock stars, we felt uncomfortable with that, because we don't really think that all other musicians and fans, it would have to be an amazing production and, you know, feat to get us for it to be, you know, for us to buy into it really and believe it, is what I think. So we kind of backed away from it, and the guys went in a bit of a different direction and chose to do it completely with actors, and, like I say, loosely based it on the life story of Ripper.
That reminds me that Kiss made some sort of horrible film in the late 70s or something, Kiss and the Phantom or something along those lines.
Yeah. I wasn't aware of that. I wasn't aware, no.
So, it was massive news at the time. Outside of guys like Freddie Mercury, Rob Halford came out and in an interview told the world that he was gay. And this came out again probably around the sort of early to mid 90s. I assume that you guys were obviously aware of this, but was there ever a time in the 70s or 80s where he was still in the closet to the band itself?
No, absolutely not. No. Like I say, it was no surprise or any consequence to us, because, I mean, we were young guys when we met, and it was, just, I mean, I think that nothing was a big deal really in the UK, because we were pretty liberal as a country, I think, in respect to things like sexuality. I mean, our neighbours, Holland, for example, had already legalised prostitution, and obviously Sweden, our neighbours as well. You know, we've always known how sexually liberated they've been with their saunas and outside jacuzzis and nudism and stuff like that. You know, so no, everything was moving on. Even when I was at school, some of the guys I knew there, were were gay, my friends, it didn't mean anything because they didn't act or do anything differently. I mean, my good friend, I talk about him, Nick, in the book. In fact, I didn't know he was gay until I was about 18. But we had a lot of escapades as a kid, and Nick was pretty. He was a pretty rough kid. He used to get me into a lot of trouble. I can tell you that. A lot of things that we did. If ever there was someone that was going to be gay in the world, I would never have earmarked Nick. No. So I had this awareness that gay people could be just. Nick was a bit more of a criminal than I was, to be honest, as a juvenile delinquent. It was, and of course, Rob never hid anything from anyone. I never saw him hide anything from anyone.
Interesting. So at the time then, because until they announced it, and then they said, the Judas Priest look at that sort of leather and whips comes from a lot of that S&M gay culture. So I guess my question is, because I don't, I don't really understand it, but were there fans then of Judas Priest at the time that were able to, I guess, sort of see through that thin veil and go, gay fans of the band who would approach Rob before he had come out, or was that was it known, I guess, in the gay scene at that time?
It's a good question because I think that because, like I say, I was wearing leather and studs. I think there's some footage of us in Japan, and you'll see me in the leather choker with studs and stuff, all in black, and I don't know how it came about, but anyway, I had the conversation with Rob, and I said, so we decided to go down to London and have some leather clothes made. And the people that made leather clothes in those days were, in fact, I think they were a gay couple of guys. It was called Mr. S in London, was their shop. So we went down there and, want some leather clothes made. So I had some made, and not as a gay man.
Yes.
I was there as a rock musician, and I think I was so over the moon because I had them the clothes made up for British Steel.
Yes.
Which was which I really liked how I looked. What I had made. Rob had some stuff made, and I don't know if he did to start with, but the kind of archetypal gay leather look, which is like, we remember the song YMCA, for example.
Yeah, of course I do,
guy there on there. Yeah, but Rob did adorn that at one point. At one point he thought, I'm going to have that, with a bullwhip and, but Rob had, to my mind, some variations of the leather look before that and after that, but when he went for that, I just thought it was super cool, really. And what the fans thought, I don't know. I think some fans didn't have an awareness. Some fans did. All I can say is the fact that we continue to have, success after success.
Oh, I'm not denying that, but I guess, KK, what I'm sort of asking is that, heavy metal is sort of this debaucherous culture. I can assume there was many groupies to share around the band during this point in time. So what I'm sort of asking is, were the gay community aware that Rob was gay so that he had sort of his own groupies available from town to town at this point in time?
I would have said yes, really, because I would have said yes. We would do concerts, and there was quite a lot of gay guys would come to the concerts. There's no doubt, But the thing is, these guys also, and now I'm thinking about it, but a lot of the guys would come, in traditional kind of denim and leather look.
Yeah.
So they were music fans.
Yes.
They were into the music. Make no bones about that. We have to understand that in the world of metal music, there's an incredible amount of guys and girls, gay or whatever, that really love the music. Because they're people.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
They're ordinary. want to put anyone down when I say the word ordinary, but what I'm saying is everybody's like-minded. That's what happens. Because it would be ridiculous to say that gay people don't like fish and chips or something.
Oh, that's not what I'm implying at all. I'm just saying it would be a shame if you guys have a flock of women available to you at every city that you go to on an international tour, and he's left out, I guess is sort of what I'm getting at.
Oh yeah, no, it was fun. I mean, Rob had gay friends, and there was gay fans. They would come on the bus at time to times, hotel rooms. It was just all a mix-up because Rob had to put up with us with girls, right?
Yes.
So, it has to be give and take. And it wasn't a problem anyway.
Okay.
Because it was all very, very good times. There wasn't a downside to anything about what we were doing. And, it was just fantastic that everybody that had a set of ears and enjoyed our music and, like I said, the genre of music in general. Everybody was a fan friend, either or both.
Okay, and I'm asking you these questions because I sort of wasn't in the scene, or I wasn't old enough to be part of it. And one of the things that's fascinating to me is you talk about, how long Judas Priest has been around. I was thinking about how much times have changed. I mean, in effect, Judas Priest is a band that has outlived the Cold War. Are there any sort of interesting changes historically through time that I guess you're sort of amazed that you've been part of or seen, through this journey?
No, I think that lots of people, I think ask me questions like, which is your favorite album or your favorite tour or something, because this was different then and you changed and you did this. Well, I've just asked people to bear in mind the fact that, it's been a lifetime, and things do change. Lots of things change. Why you would change things along the way, Some people say, why did you do this? And then you did the Turbo album, you changed that, and then you changed again for Ram It Down. Well, we've got years and decades, we're traversing through. And so it can be lots of things, can't it? Feel Good Factor, Economy, MTV is prolific, MTV stops, lots of things happen in a band's career as long as ours. And I can only put that down to why we see changes, But I think the evolution, like I say, I'm so lucky just to have been born in 1951 because I grew up as a kid. Whatever I went through is the fact that, by the time I was 13 or 14, we had the Buddy Hollies and the Eddie Cochrans and the Bill Haleys. I don't know much about those people, but I know we had those. But, by the time I was, could 13 or 14, be influenced by things, everything started to happen in the pop world, in the blues world, which led on to the rock world. So I was there at the very beginning, and I was actually working at it at the age of, 16. I was actually working at. So I'm such an incredibly lucky person to have been born in the, pretty much in the year that I was, because if I'd have been born, in a time before or a time after, but I had the best of it really because, and I'm so fortunate not just to have been witness to the whole evolution of music as we know it today. I say progressing on from the artists I've just mentioned into where we're at today, like I say, from the Kinks, to the Beatles, to now the Machine Head, Slayers, Metallica, you name it, and lots of new artists as well that are coming on board.
Mm. It's one of the questions I wanted to ask you, what is your favorite Priest album from sort of the 80s? But, you've mentioned you get this question a lot. So rather, I'll ask something a little bit differently. Like, unequivocally, my favorite Priest album is Painkiller. And I know I'm certainly not alone in saying that. It was just, huge amount of production, a very straightforward sort of album. Were you guys in a mindset of trying to create this at a time? Because it's noticeably more straightforward and heavier than a lot of the other albums that you had done previously.
Yeah, and I have to think about things like that myself. All I can say is what we did, to my mind, never changed ever. The formula that we worked, was we always did it that way. Myself and Glenn, we would, after a tour, or we would go away, collate ideas separately until we had a reasonable abundance of material. And Rob would go away and work on lyrics and song titles and stuff like that. And then myself and Glenn would get together, start piecing everything together, and then we would pull Rob in. And we would piece together some songs. And if it was 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 or whatever the number, then we would probably have a break and go back and do the same again. And so basically, we didn't have, there was no kind of product control system going on. We just would do things and put things together. So it was kind of all a bit ad hoc, really. But it was a formula that worked together for us. And we did exactly the same thing with, let's say, with the Ripper years, with the Jugulator album. It was exactly the same, but that was different again, wasn't it? And it's just the sign of the times, what's happening, what are your influences, what the economy like, are you getting on well with the family, have you had some fallout? Your mind, a lot depends on what your mindset is like, I think, when you go into that writing period. And if, let's say, both myself and Glenn, if we're going through not good times, unhappy times, while we're writing over a period of a few months, it can affect us. Or if we're really happy and really up on things, and so it's a bit of a lottery. But essentially, the common denominator is the fact that our awareness that we are Judas Priest, we're a heavy metal band, and we always, but last but not least, is the fact we were never afraid to diversify a little bit and push the boundaries of what we did in order to make it as successful, and get more and more fans on board to our music.
Okay. Look, as we wind down, KK, we'll sort of just wrap up with a few last questions. One of the things I wanted to ask you again, with all this media that you're doing at the moment, for our listeners, the other guitarist Glenn Tipton recently stepped down from touring duties, and you had said that you were a bit, you expressed that you were a bit offended, effectively, that you weren't offered to return. Considering you had effectively retired, why was that important to you to at least have the offer to rejoin the group?
Well, I think that obviously I had myself and Glenn. I just want to square everything up. Really, is the fact that we were a partnership, but just like a lot of people, we were different. We had a lot of things in common, but we also had some differences, and but we were a good team. We made it work. I'm extremely grateful to Glenn, as I said before, and all my bandmates. But there were things that I wasn't happy with, in particular with Glenn, more so than anyone else, because essentially, myself and Glenn were the driving force, really, behind the band. So we were at the forefront of, a lot of things, because we provided the music, really, and without the music, you can't put words and lyrics. Without the music, you can't create a song. So we were, we had that relationship, and but there was things that went on, business type of things, decision making, how all that worked. that for a long time, a long time, I wasn't happy with that, but I endured it and went through it, and lots of idiosyncrasies, and I'm sure both Glenn and the other guys would say, oh, yeah, what about you, KK? What about this and what about that? Like I said, it's nobody's fault, but the ship still sunk.
So did you sort of feel that by him stepping out that problem would have almost been resolved then? Is that almost what you're getting at?
Yeah, because, like I said, I didn't say anything and wanted to be discreet because, Glenn's obviously a great artist and performer and, and the fans don't want to hear certain things. But like I say, Glenn wasn't really a drinker, but he used to drink beers before and on stage, and it affected me and how I felt, and I felt nervous about the performances, and that was ongoing for too long. Not that probably that anyone in the audience would notice, but it was how I felt. So it caused me not to enjoy the performances as much as I should. And towards the end, as things were seemingly slowing down somewhat, and changing, we were getting a lot older. It became very, very important to me because all of the hard work and sacrifices that you make, there wasn't that much left to be out there night after night traveling around trains, planes, and whatever. It's pretty rigorous as you get older. You have to enjoy the concerts. And the rest of the guys knew my stance, my position, because they were the same, like-minded. They knew what the situation was. So when Glenn was unable to do it anymore, I thought the guys would obviously say, well, KK probably will be fine to step back in now, so whether I would or not, I thought that they would ask the question. And on top of that, the big one is the fact that the consideration for what the fans may or may not have wanted wasn't considered. And I thought that was a little bit unfair too, really, that's what I think, because I think the fans are entitled, me as a music fan, the fans I'm sure they would agree with me, the fans are entitled to have an opinion, some kind of voice, in what they think should happen or not, really. So, like I say, it's all sensitive areas and stuff, and so, but the reason I put the book together was to, as gracefully as I possibly could, just try to explain to everyone, answer some unanswered questions. I see things on the internet. Fans are writing things. I'm saying, guys, you are so far off track. It isn't funny. Things like, well, why didn't KK ask to come back? Why he left? He should have, he could have asked. Well, no, guys, I couldn't have asked because Glenn's replacement was made before I knew that Glenn had stepped down. So why would the fans say, why? And I read the fans saying, why didn't KK ask? Well, guys, it wasn't put on eBay,
Yeah.
grab this while you can. It wasn't that sort of thing. There was no option for me to ask.
So what is what are your goals moving forward then? If the Priest chapter is truly done and closed, then I know that you've got a lot of other interests, including sport and golf, and from what I've read, you're involved in a club that you run and some other bands. What keeps you busy?
Yeah. Well, I'd like to square that up as well, really, because I've always had my interest. All of my life, and it's not this and it's not that, it's not the other, it's a lot of things, because I love, if we talk about sports, for example, I love snooker, fishing, soccer, tennis.
My God, you are an Englishman, aren't you?
I love all of those. I've actually been fortunate enough to be I've actually been on a tennis court with John McEnroe, and so has Glenn.
Yeah, right.
So, and a lot of people might remember Vitas Gerolitis. So I've always had that, so, I've, I've Judas Priest has always been, the priority. Whatever has been going on in my life, including, dare I say it, I'm going to get hung for this, girlfriends as well. Relationships. I think the other guys will have to admit this as well. That we've made a lot of sacrifices for the band. Not just our expense, but other people's expense also. There's times when I wouldn't see my mum for, like a year, going on for, So lots of things happen. So when KK leaves the band, it's easy for somebody to say, oh yeah, he wants to take care of this or he wants to take care of that. But I've always been taking care of things all of my life. It just suits people to say certain things at a certain time just to shift the onus. That's all there is to it. But essentially, I've got to say, I'm a happy chap because I've just discovered Doc and have got back together after 20 years. And I've been watching those guys at that Japanese concert they did, and it's absolutely wonderful.
Yeah.
So where I'm coming from, or go into with this comment, is the fact that, as I've said before, there is no such thing as okay, KK. Now that this is, there's no Judas Priest no more, or there's this no more. It's an ever-moving feast for life, and especially in the musical world, in the music world, anything can happen at any time.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you left on your own terms, but is there any part of you that feels, are you a little bit sad or resentful of the fact that the band is just, it's still going on, even though that, you've made the choice to sort of port?
No, it was bound to happen. It's just the way that it has happened. I think, should have been different, really. I think Richie should have been allowed to be in his own personal, and if he likes to play Gibson Les Pauls, then he should go on stage and play those and not be, encouraged to play Flying V's and wear clothes like me and look like me and do all of that. I think that, when Ripper joined the band, we gave him license to be himself. We didn't say, you've got to do this like Rob or that like Rob. So I was, essentially my initial reaction was, that the guys have cloned me, and I didn't think that was. And I thought, well, maybe they think it's a good move because the fans, won't miss me. They'll kind of, in a way, from 10 rows back, think I'm still there. And
okay.
and the fact that my image was used in so much of the publicity for the upcoming tour, maybe that was what went on. But I think that Richie's such a good player, and that I think in his own right should be allowed to develop himself. And of course, when Glenn stepped down, I didn't see the same thing happening on that side of the stage.
Do you think Richie is an adequate successor to your lineage within the band?
Well, it's absolutely seriously difficult to replace anybody that's been there for such a long time, if you know what I'm saying. And I understand that. It's so difficult because it's not the same person. It doesn't matter, even if some people do think Ripper has got the edge over Rob and is, and can, and I can see why. His vocals are young, they're strong. When he came into the band, he was tremendous. But the tonality and the textures, there's always going to be little things here and there that are not going to be the same. And so for people prefer to have the same, but I think that, Richie's doing a lot of things at the moment, really. He's not just filling in for me now, he's also playing Glenn solos, and it all seems a bit strange to me. I don't really quite understand it. I will say this, Andy Sneap I consider Andy a friend. I've been up to Andy's studio.
Oh, really? Yeah.
I've said that, from the offset, I do speak with Andy, and wished him well and all the best. He's a great, and I really liked his band Hell.
Well, I only know him as a producer, so I don't actually know him as an artist, I suppose.
Yeah, Andy's been a player for a long time, and a massive fan of Judas Priest, massive fan, and you couldn't wish to meet and I've said this, a really nicer guy, but I think Andy would have to say, obviously, I mean, you get frontman, lead guitar players, performers, and I've been doing that all my life, and so has Glenn. So it's kind of it's a tall order to get people to step in. I'm sure that myself and Richie would have made a pretty good upfront guitar duo, but like I say, time is moving on. Opportunities, will get fewer and further between, with age things. And but the guys are pretty booked up, going out with Ozzy. That's going to be obviously a killer.
Well, they're coming down here next year. So Download's finally. So we had a festival called Soundwave, which was sort of doing what Download was doing, and they went bust a couple of years ago, and it's taken a few years, but Download is finally coming down under. And so the first one that's coming out, I think, is in February down here, and it's Ozzy, Priest, Slayer, all the mainstays, and a bunch of other bands as well. But it's the first time I think that we've had them down here.
Yeah, we went to Oz with Ripper, and I think that was it really, which is a bit of a shame. But I have been talking to some guys in Caleb in New Zealand, and we never made it there, but I think Priest did on the last tour, so that's pretty cool.
Yeah, and so what do you plan to do with yourself? I mean, you've got the books out. As I said, you're getting a lot of publicity around it. You've got a lot of interest. Where do you see yourself headed now?
Well, we're moving into the winter now in the UK. I've just relocated home. I'm in the throes of putting my little studio together, so I'm going to kind of hibernate away, I think, over the winter months and start playing a little bit more again. And I'll consider my options. I'll see how this winter goes, really, and to see what I get up to musically. But at least I've got an opportunity to be a fan again. I get to go to see concerts when I want to. Indeed. So that's pretty cool. I'm actually thinking, jumping on a plane and getting out there to see Ripper. I've got some things at my house that he wants, I won't say what it is, a few things, but he really would like to get a hold of some things I've been keeping for him. So if I get the opportunity, I'll jump on a plane and go and see the Three Tremors.
Yes,
which is going to be cool.
It's a very different environment. I had the chance to live in London for a few years, and just being, I don't know if you're able to pick up, but I'm Canadian originally. So I'm Canadian. I'm an expat who lives in Australia. I was living in London, but I was amazed while I was living over there. The perception of heavy metal is and I'm sure you got this, but it's not an underground culture by any means. It's very much a lifestyle across Europe where it's just a type of music that people listen to and a dress that they follow. And I found that outstanding because it contributes to the accessibility of going to see gigs at very reasonable prices out there.
Yeah, that's really cool. Yeah, happy to hear all of that.
Well, look, KK, I'll ask you a quick question after we sign off for tonight. But look, I really appreciate you taking the time to speak with us. It's been very enlightening for me, who's been a fan and has listened to the band for a number of years.
And thank you very much, Jess, and obviously to all of the fans. Thank you very much for your support over the years. Unfortunate things have to change because nothing lasts forever, I guess. But who's to say that things can't change before they, before the definitive ending, So the main thing is we all still have this wonderful, obviously, genre of music that we know and love, and it's still good to go. Like I said, I don't know the guys in Dockham very well, but I think they'll get Dockham, everybody check it out, because those old songs, Tooth and Nail and Dream Warriors and all that, all very cool. But they're just one of many. So there's revitalization and there's always hope.
I can visualize you now with some sort of alias KK123 on fan boards, just talking about the Dockham reunion somewhere as an anonymous. All right.
Well, like I say, just when you think this never going to happen, I would, because those guys were on tour with us, quite a few times, and I'm thinking, as me as a musician, I'm thinking those guys should get back together, come to England, so come and see a show. So hopefully that's going to happen. So as I said before, it just kind of epitomizes the fact that we can all say this today, but, there's always hope for tomorrow.
Excellent. I'll ask you a couple quick questions, but we'll sign off after this. I really appreciate your time today, KK.
Thank you, mate.